What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the PFF NFL show. Today, we're here to kick off draft season officially here on this YouTube channel by previewing the Shrine Bowl. We got All-Star Weeks coming up. We got Shrine Bowl, then Senior Bowl, and man, Super Bowls right after that. Then it's Combine, then free agency, and Dalton, before you know it, the draft is going to be here. But we're going to get you guys ready for it as best we know that we can here at PFF with a lot of great stuff. We're going to intro a lot of these players that you guys are going to be watching the practice highlights of, and you're going to be seeing in the games here at the Shrine Bowl. We'll do the same thing with the Senior Bowl in an episode that is soon to come. Dalton, how you doing, man? How you doing, my friend? You are right off the heels of being at the national championship. That was so cool that you guys got to go cover that in that big game there. But how was it, man?
Oh, fantastic atmosphere with both fan bases loud and proud of their programs. And then you've just had, Ohio State proved they were the best team in the country. Obviously, Notre Dame put up a great fight in the second half after falling behind early. And just the entire experience, right, honestly, I'd never been to a national championship game before like that. And it was just awesome from front to back, the beginning of the game and just the intros and everything and going through the adrenaline rush of it and then seeing both teams really play, to the best of their ability. I know Notre Dame was disappointed with the outcome and some of the mistakes they made, but it was a fantastic atmosphere and a great football game.
Kind of just didn't feel like anybody was going to beat Ohio State. Anybody out there who is not a fan of Ohio State or was rooting against Ohio State, sorry to let you know, that kind of felt like it was coming. We were watching that for a couple of weeks. They looked like the best team in the country. So congratulations to the Ohio State Buckeyes. We're going to be talking about a lot of those Buckeye players that were on that stacked team throughout draft season. Maybe a little bit here in this show. I'm not sure who you're going to shout out. Maybe that's the case, but I don't know. I feel as though the Ohio State and the Notre Dame guys probably getting a little bit of well-deserved rest. I don't know if any of them are going to be participating in the All-Star Bowl, but we are going to talk about the players that are. And I think the best way to do this, Dalton, is we're going to go position by position. So as we get to every single position, I will tell you who is on the list to attend the Shrine Bowl. And then we're going to pick out at least one player, sometimes for the trenches. I want us to pick out two because there's a lot of guys to talk about, but I feel like that's the best way to go about it. If you guys want to follow along yourself or you want to look up more information on these players, you can do so by getting a PFF Plus subscription. Go over to PFF.com. As draft season rolls on, we're going to have so much great content for you about learning these guys that could be on your future NFL team. We'll have the strengths and weaknesses. We'll have the scouting summary, which includes the player backgrounds. We'll give you all sorts of fantastic data and grades and success rates and things like that we have on these players. And then I'll give you a lot of player comps for these guys too. Maybe not quite in this episode, but I'll make you go out and get that PFF subscription to see some of those player comps. Maybe I'll give you a couple nuggets here in the show. I don't know. We'll see. We'll see what kind of mood I'm in when I get to that point. Let's start with quarterbacks. Quarterbacks is, how we get started at every conversation. There's a couple of really intriguing quarterbacks in Texas this year at the Shrine Bowl. I'll list them off. We got Max Brosmer, from Minnesota, Brady Cook from Missouri, Kyle McCord from Syracuse, Cam Miller from North Dakota State, Peyton Thorne from Auburn, and then Shedeur Sanders is the headliner here from Colorado. Dalton, let's talk about one of them. Who you want to point out here that you're really looking forward to seeing for one way or another?
For me, it has to be the headliner. It has to be Shedeur Sanders, Deion Sanders' son from Colorado. And look, it's for most people, he's at least one of the top two quarterbacks in this draft alongside Cam Ward. I have him QB1. I had him QB1 going into the season, and I have not changed my opinion coming out of it. Big-time processor of defenses, very, very accurate, can improvise a little bit even though he's not an elite athlete, and I know sometimes he takes too many sacks, but you look at the last 2 years, his profile is as clean as anybody. 91.4 passing grade, 49 big-time throws, 18 turnover-worthy plays is all over the last 2 years, and, after 2 years at Jackson State, where he was excellent down there, comes up to the FBS level and plays fantastic football, and that turnover-worthy play rate for his career, at least at the FBS level, in that same range as a guy like a Jaden Daniels is one of the best ever that we've tracked in the 10 years of doing this. So to me, he's a clean prospect. I know he's not imposing as far as physically, right? He's 6'1". He's probably somewhere between 200 and 210. He's not going to run a blazing 40 or might not run the 40 at all. Probably just doesn't matter to him. But this is a quarterback's quarterback. He sees the field. He throws in rhythm. He's very accurate, especially when his feet are set. The pocket presence, yes, can be kind of a detriment sometimes, but I think we have to remember with that Colorado team, Trev, they weren't just bad at running the football, they were incapable of it. They asked him to carry this team week in and week out, and he had to do everything he possibly could just to get him to the 9-4 record that he had, because there was a lot of flaws still on that team. But him and Travis Hunter and all the other weapons they had to carry it, and Shedeur's at the center of it all. I think he's a field general. I think he's the best quarterback in this class.
Yeah, I have him as QB2 right now. I think that he's most likely the only other first rounder. Of course, as this process goes on, we get to learn a little bit more about what the NFL might think of these guys. The run that Will Howard from Ohio State was on. I don't know if he's going to be a first rounder or anything, but man, that was an impressive college football playoff run there to get them into the and winning a national championship. Jalen Milroe, I think, is the ultimate wild card, depending on what you think of him. I could see NFL teams really wanting to buy into the ceiling, just like they did for Anthony Richardson. But it feels like Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders are those two first-round quarterbacks that we're going to talk about. And anytime you got a first-round caliber quarterback, perhaps even a QB1, perhaps even a first off the board type of a player like Shedeur Sanders, I agree with you. All eyes are going to be on him. I'm going to go with a guy who I think is going to fearlessly push Shedeur Sanders all week in how he is going to play and attack these practices. And that's Kyle McCord from Syracuse. Syracuse is where he played this past season, but he was at Ohio State the year before. He sort of has explained it like this, man. When he was at Ohio State, he felt like he was just under a ton of pressure, right? You got to win every single game. There is zero margin for error. If you drop one game, the season's over. It's a giant failure. And he talked about how he played very tense and reserved and hesitant when he was with the Buckeyes. This year at Syracuse, it couldn't have looked any different, truly. This is a gunslinger who was just letting it fly. Led the Power 5 in big-time throws, but on the flip side of things, also led the Power 5 in turnover-worthy plays. The way that I talk about him is saying that he is not for the faint of heart, but you better believe that there's going to be some coaches that love this mentality of how he attacks defenses, especially that mentality that we saw this past season. So, I talked about how I might be giving out some comps for some of these guys. To me, Kyle McCord wants to play like Baker Mayfield. Like, that's the mentality that he wants to play with. It feels like he's just watched Baker Mayfield highlights growing up. At least that's where the 2024 tape reflects. He wants to be able to push it deep down the field. But the thing is, he doesn't have the best NFL arm. And so he's trying to be Baker Mayfield, but I don't quite think that he has Baker's arm. So instead, I go more towards a Brock Purdy, who I think a lot of people early on in his NFL career thought that this guy was just a game manager. He was just a West Coast quarterback. He wasn't going to push it deep down the field. And that's not really how he wanted to play the game. Purdy at his best has been that gunslinger, but just not having an average NFL arm, probably a little bit below average. I'm not exactly sure what McCord's is. I'll get a better idea of it when we get to see it in person at the Shrine Bowl. But make no mistake, wherever it is on the below average, above average level, this dude's going to let it fly. And so he's somebody that's going to be really aggressive all week. And him next to or just in the same event as Shedeur Sanders, I think will naturally push Shedeur to also sort of crank up those big throws that we know that he is capable of. So I'm glad that we have these two here, and I'm really excited to see what McCord is going to be like in that new setting in Texas.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think McCord, the guy I thought about, and he certainly has less arm talent than this name, but I thought about the way he played at Syracuse was kind of Jameis Winston-ish, actually, to me, like pure tall pocket passer who's just going to fire it in no matter what the consequences are, right? Really unafraid to throw the football up the seams. And we got to remember the attitude that brought. I think what teams and scouts are going to be attracted to is Syracuse was kind of down in the dumps as a program, and they had the first 10-win season in a long time, and he had the most single-season passing yards in ACC history. I mean, you're right. Fearless is absolutely the word. All those guys that you mentioned are fearless, and that's what McCord's going to bring to the table. Pretty quick processing from the pocket, and a fearless guy who, he's going to go down on the sword because he's sick of being the conservative guy that he was at Ohio State. I like those comps a lot, and I saw even a little Jameis Winston in there.
Yeah, look, it's going to be fun. It's going to be really fun having these two guys at the same event, and it'll be fun to see, okay, what other quarterbacks in the group can really step up. Now let's move on to running backs. Okay, running backs, we got, a couple that you get really excited about. Jaden Blue from Texas, who had a really great season. He is on this list. Taj Brooks from Texas Tech. He's got a lot of fans in this upcoming draft class. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt from Arizona. Jaquindon Jackson from Arkansas. Montrell Johnson from Florida. Go Gators. Corey Kiner from Cincinnati. Phil Maffa from Clemson. And then rounding it out, we got Rocket Sanders from South Carolina. We'll go one from this group. Maybe touch on a couple of these guys just a little bit. But who's the one guy that you're really excited to see in this running back room?
Yeah, I actually think the first guy you mentioned there, it's more a guy I'm curious to see than a guy that had some sort of super season, is Jaden Blue from Texas. Because honestly, coming into the year, he was the third option for them behind C.J. Baxter and behind Trey Wisner. Baxter gets hurt at the very beginning of the year. Wisner kind of takes the greater load, of anybody in that Texas backfield. But anytime Blue touched the football, especially when he got extended touches, there was only one game this year where he got more than 15 carries. He's an explosive playmaker, and I'm curious to see his feet and his speed against, in an all-star environment here against all-star level defenders, because when he gets out in the open field, he can absolutely fly. You see there, 77.1 rushing grade, 5.4 yards per carry this season. Now he's running behind a fantastic Texas offensive line, maybe the best in the country, a lot of experience in these zone schemes, but I could see teams seeing him as kind of a one-cut, blazing speed kind of runner who can get up in the alley in a zone scheme the same way that he did at Texas. I just think he's a guy who didn't have a ton of opportunities, and when he did have them, he took advantage of them. 146 yards in the game against Clemson in the playoffs, and then you really didn't see him the rest of the way from there. So it just seemed like there were days where they leaned away from him. They leaned into Wisner. They leaned into the passing game. But Jaden Blue, at the very least, is a talented guy that I really want to see in this environment and see if he can succeed.
Yeah, I mean, he is a major name. Certainly, the way that he was able to play down the stretch, a lot of people are big fans of his. I haven't gotten to his full eval yet. He's somebody that I still have to get to, but I knew that he would be on this list. So it's like, all right, well, I get to do the full eval while also getting to watch him in person, which I think can be very valuable. So I'm very excited to see him selfishly, because a lot of these other guys I've written the full evals for, and it's more of just checking, okay, is this still the same kind of player that I saw when I was watching the tape, or is it a little bit different? Am I seeing something good or bad one way or the other from what I saw there? But Blue, I'm kind of going in with an open mind. I've basically only seen him live right now, but I have liked what I've seen live, so I'm excited to see him. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is the guy that I want to point out from Arizona. And when I say from Arizona, I kind of say that loosely, because he was a 0-star recruit coming out of Montgomery, Alabama. 5'11", 200-pound back, played 4 years at Alabama State. Then he played 1 year at New Mexico State, where he rushed for over 1,000 yards, had a really high missed tackles forced per attempt average, and really just looked like an overall playmaker. He had 65 missed tackles forced last year when he was at New Mexico State. He then transfers to Arizona, plays in one game in Arizona, and in that one game had 7 missed tackles forced per attempt, 3 explosive runs of 10 yards or more, and a damn near elite rushing grade. But that's the only game that he played this season because of eligibility issues. There's a question of, okay, that first year that he was at Alabama State, did he redshirt or not? Alabama State says that he did, but then there's statistics that are out there with him playing 8 games, and then Alabama State tried to say, no, he redshirted, and then we gave his number to somebody else, and there was just all this crazy confusion. So the sample size that we have from him at Arizona is very small, but if you combine that from what we saw in New Mexico State, we're talking about a dynamic back who is built well enough to succeed at the NFL level. He's got that nice one-cut ability. I saw it when running behind zone. I saw it when running behind more between the tackles, man gap blocking schemes. So I admittedly don't know a ton about this player, just because the only thing that we really have to go off of was his New Mexico State tape. And this is a really loaded running back class, so I've gotten to a lot of those guys' full evals first. But when I saw him on the Shrine Bowl, this is somebody who I don't think a lot of people around the country, draft fans, college football fans, NFL fans, whatever, know who Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is. And there's a good chance that he could be the talk of the town when the week is over, that he could be the guy that really flashed amongst this group as somebody who plays very well. Any thoughts on him, or any thoughts really quick on the rest of the group, the rest of the running back room that we have?
No, on him, I just want to say I watched a lot of him of the New Mexico State tape, in part because, when I was studying, he was playing over there that year in 2023 with Diego Pavia and Eli Stowers, who are now starring with Vanderbilt, and turned that program around. And it was a very run-heavy offense with a lot of different concepts in it. It's a very complicated rushing offense with a lot of different looks. So I think the two things he has going for him, he runs really hard, right? He was kind of the engine of it all, so Pavia and Stowers could do everything off of it. And he's got good vision. Like that, I think that's a big thing. That's always a very important trait for these backs, is especially when all those different schemes and knowing when you're supposed to cut, where you're supposed to cut. Very good vision, very hard runner. I think he's a player who could really, he's got a lot of diverse experience, like you mentioned. You hope that basically the year off without having any game reps doesn't hurt him, but he's a solid back, and I think he's someone that coaches could come out here and like because he's going to run hard. He's going to give it A-plus effort, and he's got good vision in a lot of different concepts.
Hey, anytime you're boasting vision like that, I'm in. Like that is something that is the most important trait in my opinion. Yeah, you obviously got to have the athletic ability, but like going on to Taj Brooks, like just touching on Taj Brooks, I think that sometimes Taj Brooks has the best vision in this class. There are some times when I just I question the overall athletic ability with him, and I saw that a handful of times on tape where he was one of my favorite running backs that we had going into this season, and then doing his full scouting eval, I felt like there were more times than I would have preferred where I sat here questioning his overall athleticism. And if I'm doing that at the college level, then you're really going to do that at the NFL level as these guys get bigger, faster, and stronger. So can Taj Brooks show me a little bit of juice that I was hoping to see throughout his tape? I think I'm excited to see him. Jaquindon Jackson, who former quarterback turned into a running back. I mean, he's a big, tall back with these big, long strides. Can he break open a couple of runs in practices or in the game? I think that could really help him stand out. And then I think Phil Maffa and Rocket Sanders, they got fans within their, subsections of college football and the NFL draft world is these bigger backs that people like to go to talk about really running behind your pads and having a lot of power. Don't always get a lot of opportunity to showcase that at all-star events until you really get into the game, but we've certainly seen that before, and maybe they can do that. So bumping over to wide receiver, we'll go 2 each here for the wide receiver position just because there's so many guys. Ja'Cory Brooks is one of them from Louisville. Sam Brown from Miami. Jacoby George as well from Miami. Trayshawn Holden from Oregon. Jimmy Horn from Colorado, Keandre Lambert-Smith from Auburn, Dominic Lovett from Georgia, Jackson Meeks from Syracuse, Kanata Mumfield from Pittsburgh, Nick Nash, the Triple Crown winner, correct? He won the Triple Crown? He won the Triple Crown in college football.
He did, yeah.
Just insanely productive, whether it was Triple Crown or not. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I believe it is. I don't want to take that crown away from him if he earned it. Caden Prather from Maryland, Will Shepard from Colorado, Deontay Thornton from Tennessee, Theo Weiss Jr. from Missouri, Antoine Wells, Juice Wells from Ole Miss, LeJontay West from Colorado, and then Ricky White from UNLV. Let's pick 2 guys that we sort of dive into a little bit deeper, but man, there's so much to say about this entire wide receiver group. There's a couple of things that we could say for a lot of these other guys that we don't mention at the top, but who's the 2 that you really want to focus on that you're excited to see this weekend?
I'm gonna go with the very last 2 guys that you mentioned, and for a couple of different reasons. I'll start with Ricky White from UNLV. I've got him as I think he's one of the sleeper wide receivers in this class. I could very well see him being a productive player in the NFL. He's a smooth route runner. He's got decent size. I think he's about 6'1", good speed, and I think he just makes plays. Like, he's one of these guys who just gets open, good hands, makes plays, and he hasn't worked exactly with ideal passers the last 2 years, and he's racked up, I think, right around 2,600 yards. He's just everything about when I watch him, like, nothing maybe explodes off the tape as far as tools, but he's just a darn good football player. And I like the fact, too, that he'll even contribute on special teams. He had a hand in blocking a handful of punts this year. He was, he's the best player on their entire team. And he's out there lining up on the front line and on the punt coverage unit and blocking punts too. So he'll do whatever it takes to win. And I think there was just times you could see this UNLV offense. It's a run-heavy offense, but they were balanced when they got Ricky White, when they almost force-fed him the football. I think there are times I watch him and I see shades of even a Rashee Rice, out of SMU when he came out. Now, obviously, starring with the Chiefs when he's healthy. But he's a guy I just really like as a smooth route runner, better speed after the catch than you might think, good hands, and he's comfortable anywhere from any alignment on the field. I think they did a nice job of getting him in the slot a little bit more. So just a good football player that I like, probably in that round 4 range, but I think he's a smooth athlete and can really run it. And the second one for me, there's a little bit of bias to this. I'm going to go with LeJontay Wester from Colorado, but a couple of years before that, he spent down in FAU and basically carried their offense for 2 years. He was one of the best players in the country in 2023 out of the slot, definitely undersized at about 5'10" and maybe 175, but right around a 50% contested catch rate for his career, which makes almost no sense considering his size. Good route runner, better speed than you might think for a guy that small, and just a tough football player. He's a slot-only guy. He's a guy, I'll admit, I'm kind of rooting for him because of the FAU ties, and he really became Colorado's second-best receiver down the stretch behind Travis Hunter. So a guy I'm kind of rooting for. I want to see him get a shot. LeJontay Wester, formerly from FAU, now coming out of Colorado, and I think an underrated player who maybe could get a 6th or 7th round look or a priority UDFA kind of guy.
Yeah, I'm excited to see the Colorado guys. I really am. I would assume they're all going to stick together, right? They're not going to give them a different quarterback, certainly if Shadur is there. So I think that all the Colorado guys are going to be familiar with their quarterback that they have there, and I'm excited to see how they stand out because a couple of those dudes have some juice. You know, Wester is one of them. He plays. He's a small dude, but he plays with a chip on his shoulder, man. He tries to play a lot bigger than his measurables say, and you always love that about a wide receiver. Ricky White, you mentioned, extremely productive, does a lot of things on special teams, and if he continues to be that two-phase player, being able to play offense and special teams really well, then you're absolutely going to get looks, sometime on day three, where teams are going to want to plug you in as somebody who's on the bottom of their roster who they know can fill multiple spots for you and be a potential impact player there. Another guy who you talked about how productive Ricky White has been. I do want to touch on Nick Nash though, because all right, insanely productive season this year for him. Led the country in receptions and receiving yards, and I mean it was like, all right, well, is this guy just getting force-fed the football, or what kind of an NFL prospect is he? Because there's a lot of times that this stuff happens. We get these college football players that just amass these crazy numbers, but then they don't turn into pros. And people go like, okay, well, what happened there? What's it? Well, sometimes you just don't see athletic ability at the standard of the pro level when it comes to normally we're talking about like running backs or wide receivers that are able to do this kinds of stuff. With Nick Nash, he's about 6 feet tall. Sorry, 6'2", 195 pounds. He was a former quarterback. He was a dual threat quarterback in high school, and then he was a dual threat quarterback when he was at San Jose State for his first 4 years that he was there. Then in that fifth season, 2023, he transferred over and he played a lot more wide receiver. And then this past year, he played wide receiver again in his sixth year, his final year of eligibility, and he was a monster. Like, as you can see, that it always feels like a negative to say force fed him the ball, but he was their best option. There's no doubt about it. Now, he's a little bit tricky when it comes to the pro projection and why I'm excited to see him in Texas at the Shrine Bowl, because as of right now, he feels like just a big slot type of a player, right? You're not really putting him in line at tight end, given that he's a little bit taller. He just doesn't have that frame for it. You could play him out at the sideline as an X, but he clearly does his best work when he can operate in space and has a little bit of a size mismatch. Now, the reason why I'm intrigued about him and do think that he's got somewhat of an NFL future is I think the footwork and the route running and the IQ that he plays with is great. It's not just, oh, I'm a bigger slot receiver and I'm winning just because I'm taller than everybody. He's got great footwork. He's got quick footwork out of his stance. He knows how to drag the feet. He knows how to shimmy the shoulders, set defenders up to where they're completely neutral. They don't really have a shade or a turn one way or the other. He's not giving anything away. And then I think for a player of his size, he can really put his foot in the ground and he can change direction. He could create that separation. So can he do that outside of San Jose State's offensive system? Can he do that on the outside? Can he do that as a move wide receiver, or does it just have to be in the slot? The all-star events are great because they give you this versatility with players, and coaches will play them in different spots for a reason. Yes, they're trying to win the game. They're trying to win the Shrine Bowl, but what they're really trying to do is evaluate these players correctly for the NFL level. So Nash is one that you take him out of that system at San Jose State, and you want to see what he's made of. So he's extremely intriguing to me. So is Deontay Thornton Jr. from Tennessee. This is a bigger, explosive type of receiver, vertical threat type of a guy. He started his career at Oregon, then he goes over to Tennessee. I'm wondering, is he more than just a vertical receiver? Because I know he's got that to him. He's got that length. He's got that size. He's got that vertical explosiveness. Are you a little bit more? Can I see more of the in-breaking routes? Are you an over-the-middle type of a receiver? And I think they're going to ask him to run plenty of those routes. Now, also, I'm going to pay attention to how he wins in the one-on-ones as a vertical wide receiver, certainly when you are playing in Tennessee's system. They do a great job of giving you free releases. Think about Jalen Hyatt when he was at Tennessee, when he was the Biletnikoff winner there. Jalen Hyatt, despite, the size, being a little bit taller, having some length to him, having some good arm length, like he didn't really play on the line of scrimmage very much. He didn't really go up against press coverage because he had deep speed, and they would often align him in as the back receiver in a stacked alignment, or in the slot, but not on the line of scrimmage on the slot. He'd be a step back from from the line of scrimmage. So he's getting a couple of steps of a head start. They knew what he was able to do vertically, so he really rarely faced that press coverage. For a guy like Deontay Thornton, I'm not saying that he is exactly like Jalen Hyatt, but him getting to go to this all-star event, especially in the one-on-one drills, they're going to press him. What do you like against press coverage? Do you have that strength? Do you have that hand quickness, that hand precision to be able to get clean and attack different leverages? How many tricks do you have? How much can you get off of press coverage? What kind of versatility do you present? Because I think that Thornton's a really good athlete. How versatile of a wide receiver can you be? So Nick Nash and Deontay Thornton are two guys that I'm looking forward to watching as well.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'll start with Thornton there. I think that's always a concern with the receivers that come out of Tennessee because they see less man coverage than almost any team in the country because of the formations that they're always in. And then you're talking about, the route diversity. There isn't a whole lot there. It's go balls, it's skinny posts, it's curls, but there isn't a whole lot else to it. And you mentioned all of the off coverage that they see. So, I think as far as it goes with him, it's going to be the same questions we asked with a lot of Tennessee guys. And Nash, I think it is a jump in the level of competition. He doesn't see a lot of press man himself out there in the Mountain West. It's not a conference outside of maybe one or two teams, obviously, that is known for coverage ability. So I think just to see Nash step up with the level of competition is going to be fun to watch at the Shrine Bowl.
So a couple of the other receivers, I don't know if you just wanted to touch on any of these guys, if anybody really stood out to you, but like Juice Wells is somebody who I really liked at South Carolina, really when he was a sophomore. Then he had the injury-riddled season where he didn't really do much, and he goes over to Ole Miss, and it feels like he did even less. So it's like, man, I really liked him as a sophomore. Maybe a change of environment will be good for him. So I'm looking forward to seeing Juice Wells. Theo Weiss was the other wide receiver. It feels disrespectful to say it like that, but like the other wide receiver that was there that was very productive and good next to Luther Burden III. So, can Theo Weiss really stand out? I think that some people looked at that situation and maybe Weiss didn't really get the credit that he deserved because he was sort of living under Luther Burden's shadow, but maybe it was more of a dynamic duo than people are giving them credit for. And perhaps Weiss can be somebody who could really stand out this week. And then the other guy I like is Caden Prather. Ty Felton was the guy that I think Maryland emphasized a lot this year. He got a lot more of the lion's share of the targets. He was the higher threat percentage player, but I think that Prather's actually built more like an NFL wide receiver. He's got that frame to him. He's got those long arms. I think he can play on the line of scrimmage. I think he can play in the slot. I think he can play as an off the line wide receiver as well as a flanker. So I think Prather's got some all around ability. It's just what's the ceiling with Caden Prather, and maybe we'll get an answer as to why they didn't emphasize him as much if we go to Mobile and he's not able to stand out. But if he is, I like the way this dude is built. So anything else in the wide receivers before we move on to tight ends?
I think to throw one more that I'm curious to see out there is Ja'Cory Brooks from Louisville. I think he's got really good speed. He's got a really good idea of how to get himself open vertically. I think he'll be a lot of fun to watch in one-on-ones.
So the tight end position, a handful of guys to talk about here at tight end. Jalen Conyers from Texas Tech. Mitchell Evans from Notre Dame, Rivaldo Fairweather, elite name, by the way, from Auburn, Aronde Gaston II from Syracuse, Luke Lachey from Iowa, Caden Prescorn from Mississippi, Carter Runyon from Townsend, and then Ben Urasek from Georgia. Really nice tight end group, and you and I were chatting a little bit before the show. The tight end group this year, I think it was touted to be a lot better at the top than maybe it is, but it is still a deep group. There are still a lot of intriguing names around, maybe that fringe third round to early day 3 type of a range. And I think we got a handful of guys here at the Shrine Bowl that are already in that conversation. Maybe they're just able to bump themselves up, become those coaches' favorites, and maybe really latch onto teams. And when it comes to sorting themselves out, standing above the competition of those mid-round tight end picks, a couple of them you're going to see have the chance to do that with certain teams. So who do you want to point out from the tight end spot?
So I think it's a guy who there's going to be a lot of conversation about as far as he's kind of the ultimate tweener right now because of the way he was used. You mentioned Kyle McCord earlier from Syracuse. I'm going to talk about his top target, Aronde Gadsden, 6'5", 236. And before this season, it was kind of a weird background because in 2022, he was a wide receiver. I mean, there's no question about it. He very rarely aligned in line. 2023 only played, I think, 1 or 2 games and then got hurt and was out the rest of the season. This season, they get Fran Brown and the new coaching staff in there, McCord as the quarterback. They use him a little more 50-50. I think it was a little over 300 snaps he played in line. Didn't get a ton of targets, 15 targets, I believe 11 catches from an in-line alignment. But he's got everything to me out of this tight end group, aside from maybe the top 2 guys, Tyler Warren and Colston Loveland. I think he's got everything you could ask for, at least as a receiver, right? I think he's a better route runner than, say, a guy like a Mason Taylor. I think he's more explosive than guys like, Gunnar Helm and Terrence Ferguson. It's just a matter of if you think he's actually a tight end. And the blocking, to me, it's definitely not great. He's got a longer, thinner frame. But this year, it was at least serviceable when he wanted to do it. When he put in the effort to do it, it was at least passable to me. And I think there are reps you see where, he kind of plays like a wide receiver who doesn't necessarily want to block like that. If you can get a team that can get enough inline blocking out of him, he's never going to be great at it, or he's just going to be that move weapon for you, then fine. I think there's going to be a lot of discussion about what his role is. Should he just be a 6'5", 230-pound receiver? Is he a tight end? Is he only nominally a tight end? And he's actually kind of that F who moves around the formation and you do different things with. But I think his talent is there. You look at his 3 seasons here, the last 3 seasons at Syracuse, 89.8 receiving grade. I do think he's honestly a more dynamic receiver than the vast majority of tight ends in this class. It's just a matter of, if he's tough enough to call him a tight end, does he need to put on a few pounds so you can use him in line? Do you just need to use him as a Mike Gesicki type of piece that he's been his whole career? But I think there is definitely talent here on the receiving side, more so than most of the other guys in this class. And I'd be curious to see how he's even used in the Shrine Bowl and what the alignments are, or how much they test him in line. How much does he get tested in these blocking drills? I think he's one of the wild cards in this tight end class.
With him, to me, the thing that I'm looking forward to the most, and I just went over some final evals for the tight end spot, just for the class overall. The routes, that's what I'm looking forward to seeing the most at the Shrine Bowl. How crisp are the routes? Because there are way too many times when I was watching, like, he's got the frame. You're right. If your cup of tea for a receiving tight end is big, long, big catch radius type of a thing, receiver mentality, I can see you buying into him. The thing that gives me hesitation with him is a lot of his routes at Syracuse are very rounded. They're not really as much. I mean, when he's doing like comeback routes, it's a little bit different. It's a little more crisp, obviously, for the nature of the movement that he is doing. But, when we're talking about in-breaking routes, out-breaking routes, even like post, things like that, it's so much more rounded than you'd want it to be to create that separation at the next level. And so to me, can he create a little bit more separation? Can he be a little bit more sharp in his movements at the Shrine Bowl and in those practices? That's what I'm really looking forward to, because you're right. The receiving ability is there, even if you don't call him a tight end, even if he's just a wide receiver, whatever. If you can show me that you're a little bit more crisp with your routes, I could buy into you a little bit more. Benjamin Urasek is the guy that I want to touch on, because I think I'm just going to be it's Urasek, by the way. That was muscle memory from me. I looked up the pronunciation. I was pronouncing it wrong for like 6 months. Urasek. I need to get that correct, because Sikkema people often mispronounce, so I always try to make sure that I'm pronouncing people's last name the right way, because I know how that feels. So Benjamin Urasek, he's the tight end from Georgia. I think I'm just going to be a Urasek fan. I think that this is just one of my guys within the tight end class that I'm going to give a little bit of the benefit of the doubt, are going to be a little bit more high, a little bit higher on than most. He played most of his career at Stanford and then transferred over to Georgia. His overall snap count was lower this year because it was a deep tight end room that you had at Georgia, but they still used Urasek in so many different situations. And 6'4", 245 pounds. What I really like for him to do is probably put on about 5 to 10 more pounds and just be more of an inline tight end. Because right now, I think at his current strength and weight level, I like his blocking fundamentals. I love that the hands are always inside. He's got pretty good grip strength. The feet are very quick, so he's able to mirror and he's able to move guys, but he lacks that true displacement push in the run game as a run blocker. He can maintain blocks pretty well, but would love for him to get a little bit stronger, for him to maintain that more, because Georgia uses him in all sorts of different situations. They use him as an inline tight end. They use him as a wing back, a little bit detached, step back from the line of scrimmage for split zone situations, and even with him going off on routes from that alignment. They'll use him as a fullback, as a lead blocker when it comes to short yardage and goal line situations. And then they'll also use him as a slot as a receiver. And I think he's got really reliable hands. I think that just right now, he's probably about 10 to 15 pounds away from being looked at as, okay, we got an all-around tight end here. This is somebody who can give us a little bit of juice in the receiving game. He's got those strong hands. I think he's got decent wiggle for his size, but you want him to be a little bit more reliable, a little bit more impactful in the run game. And I don't think it's lack of technique that's really getting in the way. I just think it's a little bit of a lack of strength. So if you give me that, I truly think that we're talking about a tight end 2 caliber type of player here. Not this like tight end 1 that you're feeding an offense through, but somebody who is very valuable to a multi-tight end set, and somebody who, like I said, you can even use in the slot with 2 tight ends on the field, as a fullback out of the backfield. You can use him in a lot of different situations because I do think he's a very smart football player. So I think the lack of production from him this year was more of a product of how deep the tight end room is in Georgia. And I think that you still saw his versatility and what he brings to the table. So Jurasik is one of my dudes. I'm looking forward to see him this weekend to see if he's able to stand out a little bit.
Yeah, no, I agree. I love what you said about his blocking fundamentals, because I thought when I was watching all these guys that he was one of the better blockers in the class. And you mentioned just maybe not physically dominant, but he certainly knows what he's doing. He was taught well at Stanford. I think if you want to watch him as a receiver, you go back and watch the Stanford tape, because this year he was recovering from a knee injury as well. And you mentioned it, in a really deep tight end room with Georgia. They had 3 good tight ends, including him. I thought a natural on in-breaking routes especially. I thought he would be a much better fit, especially with Carson Beck at Georgia, and they would use him more as a receiver. But they had Oscar Delp, they had Lawson Lucky, they had other guys for that. But you mentioned it. I think a fundamentally sound player who maybe isn't all that explosive as a blocker or a receiver, but can definitely be a useful player if he does get a little bit stronger.
All right, before we get onto the trenches, we're going to get on the offensive lineman, defensive lineman, then we'll get to edge rushers as well. Got to talk to you guys about Cherry Bundy, our friends who are fueling the healthy revolution. Truly, if you live an active lifestyle at all whatsoever, whether it's, a brisk jog around the neighborhood a couple of times a week, maybe you're getting your steps in, just walking around the neighborhood, walking around your house, doing CrossFit every single day, training for a marathon, and everything in between, Cherry Bundy's got all sorts of products to be able to help you out. Natural products and ingredients with no added sugar to them. Those tart cherries that they're made with, they've got the highest antioxidant fruit and vegetable in the world. Means it reduces soreness, it increases recovery, helps support immunity, it's got natural melatonin to help you improve sleep, and they also have products that are specifically built for that. So if you're looking at something that, man, I need a little bit of help sleeping, they've got stuff that you can be able to take, and even if you're not super active, it can really help you out in that regard, but it can also help you with the recovery. It can give you a little bit of extra energy, a little bit of boost. They've got all sorts of stuff you should check out. Nearly 500 collegiate and professional sports teams use this product. Every single NFL team does. 66 out of the 67 Power 4 conference teams use it. Every single NCAA national champion in football and basketball since 2007. Haven't double-checked to make sure Ohio State used it because that's pretty recent, but I got to think that, they're in the mix there somewhere. All the products are available on Amazon, cherrybundy.com, retailers nationwide. Kroger, Publix, like your local retailers, check those out. They might have them there, but if not, you can check out all the fantastic products that they have and get whatever you need to suit your active lifestyle over at cherrybundy.com. Offensive linemen. All right, we got a lot, as you would expect. It's just one group here. It's not tackles, centers, interior offensive linemen, because the best part about all-star events is they're going to use these guys in a lot of different ways. These guys who are tackles, who maybe don't have the longest arms, they'll give them an opportunity to play guard. These guards that maybe they don't quite have the size to play guard at the next level. Okay, well, they're going to give them a shot at center. Even if you haven't snapped before, sometimes that's what you love, right? These guys who have the opportunity to be able to do that. And Hunter Norzad, somebody who I remember watching last year from Penn State, who was, he played center, he played guard for them, and he ended up being a fan favorite when it came to draft weekend, and gets to go to the Kansas City Chiefs. So the offensive line for the Shrine Bowl this year. Bryce Cabledew's at the top with Kansas. He's the first name here. Gerald Christian Lettenhan from Oregon State. Jack Conley from Boston College. Dalton Cooper from Oklahoma State. Tyler Cooper from Minnesota. Brendan Crenshaw Dixon from Florida. Joshua Gray from Oregon State. Gus Hartwig from Purdue. Joe Huber from Wisconsin. Nash Jones from Texas State. Drew Kendall from Boston College. Tim McKay at NC State. Luke Newman, Michigan State. Thomas Perry Middlebury, Holland Pierce, the massive mountain of a man from Rutgers, Esapole from Washington State, Xavier Truss from Georgia, Gareth Warren from Lindenwood, Trey Weddick from Indiana, Marcus Ware from Montana State, Aiden Williams from Minnesota Duluth, and then John Williams from Cincinnati rounds it out there. Dalton, who's two offensive linemen? We'll go with two again here that you want to shout out here.
I'm going to mention that big, monstrous left tackle from Rutgers, Holland Pierce, like you mentioned. 6'8", 345 is what he's listed at. Just an absolute road grader for Rutgers, a team that loves to run the football. You know, Greg Schiano loves his physical guys up there in Piscataway. But I think you always want to see these types of guys because you go, okay, what is the ability? What is the footwork? How does it match up with the size, right? Is he going to stick at tackle? Is he going to move inside to guard in the NFL like, say, a Daniel Faalele who's playing right guard right now for the Ravens at a similar size? But you look at the grades that we have on him, 85.1 overall in 2024, third best among Power 4 left tackles behind Kelvin Banks Jr., who's going to be in the first round, and Wyatt Milam from West Virginia, who might be a first-round pick, and he's second behind Milam in run blocking grade. Pass blocking grade also respectable there, 79.5, playing in the Big Ten, playing some really good pass rushers in the Big Ten, but this is a big mauler. I mean, you can see it in that picture right there. This is a guy that, you know, we're going to want to see in one-on-ones if they're getting in these Oklahoma drills and things like that. He can maul you. I mean, 6'8", 345. Nobody out there is going to be bigger than he is. That's one guy that I want to see. And the other one, Marcus Ware, you mentioned from Montana State. In 2023, highest graded tackle in the FCS in the country, playing right tackle. This year moves inside to right guard, and he's the highest graded guard in the FCS as well. I think he's a better fit at guard. He's about 6'4", 300 pounds he's listed at. Not quite the athlete that, say, a guy like Mason McCormick was out of South Dakota State last year, but I think if you're looking for a classic downhill road grading kind of guard, especially a team with a gap scheme that runs a lot of duo, this is the kind of guy I think about like the Buffalo Bills would draft and just get downhill with them, right? I think the question for me with Weir is going to be dealing with the speed rushers on the defensive line, guys with better moves, guys with better footwork. But I think he is strong enough to play inside in this Shrine Bowl and even at the NFL level. It's going to be a matter of his footwork. He's a little bit flat-footed, kind of an old-school guard who's going to get downhill on you. But these are two guys I'm really excited to see how they step up, one, for the level of competition, and two, need to see them in pass protection. If they can show good pass protection skills, I think they can move up people's boards.
I'm looking forward to seeing, first of all, Brendan Crenshaw Dixon at Florida, who it felt like he was kind of like in and out of the lineup to start the season and never really understood it. I always felt like he was their best option at one of those tackle spots, surely. And then he sort of gained a hold of that tackle role as the season went on. To me, 6'7", at least that's what he's listed at. So even if it's a little bit shorter, 6'6" is still great size for the NFL. 317 pounds. You know, he was at San Diego State before he goes over to Florida. He's got a ton of experience to him. It started at right tackle and left tackle. A lot of diversity in how he can line up as that swing tackle. I don't think he's going to be drafted as like a starting offensive tackle or anything, but yeah, I've been told by NFL coaches before, hey, until you have a spot on the offensive line, you better be able to play all 5 spots, because if we think you're the next best offensive lineman that we have on the team, we're going to put you in there, and you got to be able to play. You got to be ready for it. So especially for a swing tackle position, one of those priority backup offensive tackles, I think Crenshaw Dixon he's got a chance to be that type of a player for certain teams. I think he's really patient. All of those years of starting, all of that experience that he had at San Diego State and at Florida has allowed him to be a very patient offensive tackle. He sort of struggles, against the faster players, getting cross face, being able to mirror, having that lateral ability. The feet are a little bit heavier, so that definitely goes into it, and I think that's why we don't talk about this guy getting drafted a lot higher. But I think at the Shrine Bowl, we'll see that left to right tackle versatility to him. I can't wait to see him go up against some of the better speed rushers that we have at this event, because I would love to see in person how he mitigates that. I think that he's so patient when it comes to his arms and his timing and his strikes and his punches and all that kinds of stuff. He's not over on his toes. He's not over eager to make contact. He waits for pass rushers to sort of give away what they're doing, and then he knows how to counter it. So love the mentality that he plays with. I'm just a little bit worried of the feet a little bit too heavy to be considered a full-time starting offensive tackle at the NFL level. But I think he could be a damn good reserve offensive tackle because of the versatility that he brings there. And then the other one, I'll go to the interior. Tyler Cooper from Minnesota. I just think this dude's damn solid. And I think he gives you some plus length as an interior player. 6'6", 310 pounds. So he's got that plus arm length for an offensive guard. You normally don't see things like that. Now, he's another one who he struggles a little bit with more of the NFL caliber type of rushers, the guys who are really strong, the guys who are really fast. Those are the assignments that have sort of given Cooper some fits, at least from what I saw watching the games for his full scouting eval. But he's got those long arms to be able to be a little bit more patient. I did feel as though he was a little too on his toes at times. Maybe it's a little bit of just a waist bending natural tendency, but he's got longer arms to be a little bit more patient. So do I see a little bit more of that patience from him at the Shrine Bowl in Texas in a different situation where you know exactly what he's trying to work on there? And I'm curious if now we'll see with his official measurements once we get the official measurements. If his arms are like longer, like offensive tackle longer, does he actually get some reps out of tackle? Like, do they actually try to make this guy a 5-position versatile offensive lineman if they want to show some NFL teams that he's able to do that? Because again, even if you are not a starting caliber player, having that sort of backup reserve ability, I think could absolutely impact your draft position and even get you drafted a full round higher if they believe that they can get a good floor out of you at tackle and at guard. So very curious to see what his measurables are, if they're good enough to be able to play tackle. But those are two guys that I'm going to keep an eye on. But yeah, I mean, you shouting out Pierce is a good one because holy cow, they don't make him like Allen Pierce. I mean, that dude is a stunt double for the Mountain in Game of Thrones. And so if he can look even like he's got the potential to be an NFL pass blocker, you know the league is going to be in on this guy. So he's somebody who I'm actually looking forward the most to just standing next to him and feeling what that is like, standing next to Allen Pierce. But then, of course, when he puts the helmet on and he goes out there, look forward to see what he could be in his finesse game as well.
Absolutely. First guy off the bus, right? That's the guy they always talk about, first guy off the bus. And if that's the one you have there, you know someone's going to take a chance on him, right? I just think for all those guys you mentioned, for Cooper and Pierce is, I think, the same thing. You know, Weir has already gone through it at Montana State, finding out what position is ideally best for them. And I think there are going to be, obviously, some of these guys who are going to need to play multiple positions to play on an NFL roster, right? So it's a key skill for them, and I think one of them that I'm always looking forward to with these All-Star games.
Interior defensive line. Tommy Akimbisto from Maryland, Zeke Biggers from Georgia Tech, Warren Brinson from Georgia, Joe Evans from UTSA, Kenneth Grant from Michigan, Eric Gregory from Arkansas, Jared Harrison Hunt from SMU, Tonka Hemingway from South Carolina, Cam Horsley from Boston College, Nash Hutchmacher from Nebraska, Sean Martin from West Virginia, J.J. Pegues from Ole Miss, Jordan Phillips from Maryland, Nazir Stackhouse from Georgia, Toya from UCLA, and then CJ West from Indiana. Who do you like out of that group, Dalton?
All right, I'm going in the Big Ten with two monstrous run stoppers. First up, the headliner of that group is Kenneth Grant from Michigan. 6'3", 340. More athletic than any person should be at 340 pounds. I mean, first of all, you talk about A-gap, B-gap, doesn't matter. You know, he was the perfect complement playing next to Mason Graham in Michigan. He just, when you watch, even against double teams, he does not move. He does not move backwards almost ever. You just can't move this guy. And then the other thing I love about him is just his hand usage and his ability to shed blocks, especially with the swim move and the short area quickness at 340 pounds is just insane. I've always marveled at how good an athlete he is. This is an elite run stopper, one of the elite run stoppers in this draft. And he's a productive pass rusher too on the inside. I think he's a good pocket pusher. Again, that quickness and hand usage really helps. 75.4 pass rush grade. If you ever got that out of a guy this size in the NFL on the inside, he's going to be a serious problem. I think, look, Michigan had the best defensive line in the country across the board. It's not just Mason Graham. Grant's a potential first-round pick. I mean, he's another guy. You just want to go out there just to see him work, man. I mean, he can do it all, and I think he could be a monstrous, monstrous run defender. And I think another guy, I'm going to stay in the Big Ten here, underrated player CJ West from Indiana. And all of the flash this year was about Kurt Cignetti and the offense and Curtis Rourke and everything going on with the Hoosiers. Their run defense was actually the best part of their team, and CJ West was a huge part of that. purely a nose guy, an A-gap kind of defensive tackle, but 83.9 overall grade this year, 88.1 run defense grade. 3 straight years of at least an 80 grade, 2 of them at Kent State. We got to remember, he transferred in from Kent State to Indiana. At Kent State, he was basically their only good player on their entire team. So he moves up to Indiana. He's fantastic. I got a stat for you on him, Trevor. 30.3% of his run defense snaps this year, he earned a positive grade. Over 30%. The only 2 guys in the country that had a higher percentage, Mason Graham, top 10 pick, Walter Nolan, potential first-round pick. That's it. This is another guy. You want just a brick wall run stopper that does not move backwards? I'm telling you, you watch film of teams trying to run between the tackles on Indiana, and there's the biggest number 8 you'll ever see, C.J. West on the inside, plug in every hole. He's just a fantastic run stopper. Not much as a pass rusher. They had other guys for that, and he's just not quite that explosive. But if you're talking about a guy that just plug up the A-gaps and teams are not going to run between the tackles on you, C.J. West is your guy. I think he's got huge value as a day 3, maybe a one-tool guy, but he can really help your run defense.
Hey, coaches want that one tool. There's no doubt about it, being able to establish the line of scrimmage. And so I think that pass rush always is the flashier part of these events, right? The one-on-ones, how you do in those pass rush reps. But you still have an opportunity to really show up as a great run defender, especially as an interior defensive lineman. So Wes is going to have this chance to showcase his bread and butter and why he's going to get drafted. I'm really looking forward to watching JJ Pegues because he is just one of the most interesting players in this entire draft class, right? Defensive tackle for Ole Miss. And all right, I'm going to take you back a little bit on his football journey. Throughout his high school career, he played quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, and a little defensive end in just his senior season. This is somebody that, if you know anything about JJ Pegues, you've already seen it. I mean, he's a massive dude. He's around 300 pounds. He's like 6'2", 300 pounds. And they'll play him at defensive tackle. They'll play him at tight end. They'll play him at fullback. They'll play him at running back. They'll play him at wildcat quarterback. And I'm not talking about the high school background, which he already did all that at high school. I'm talking about at Ole Miss. In the SEC, he does this. They allow him to do this because he is just crazy versatile. He won a state championship his senior season playing all of those positions. Also played basketball because, of course, he was a multi-sport guy. Why wouldn't he be? So he started his career, played 2 games in his true freshman season at tight end. Then he switched from tight end to defensive tackle. Then he transferred over to Ole Miss because he was at Auburn first. Then he became more of a rotational player in 2022, full-time starter in 2023, full-time starter and an incredibly versatile player in 2024. Just the amount of things that this player brings to the table. To me, I mean, you just watch him at defensive tackle. He's so nimble. He's so quick. He's so explosive. And it shouldn't be that much of a shock given his background, but you see there, like, good run defense grades. The pass rushing, I think, is still coming along for him, but that's actually the part of his game that I think has the highest potential. So what do we think about what he could be as a pass rusher? Can he bring that to the table? Does he have a all-star type of jump like what we saw with Keanu Benton? Remember Keanu Benton, right? When Benton was coming out of Wisconsin, he was known as just this run stuffer, right? Okay, like this guy can really... He can hold a point of attack. He's a good run stuffer. And then that final year that he was at Wisconsin, he got a little bit better at pass rushing. But then it was until he got to the All-Star weekends that the guy really stood out, that he really made a difference from where he was stacked up against his peers in this class. And he ends up getting drafted because of it. Now he's a pivotal part of what the Steelers are doing up front along their interior defensive line. I wonder if we're about to see a similar rise from J.J. Pegues because with that type of a diverse background, in all the positions that he could play, the NFL is going to want to buy in on this guy. So if he just gets even a little bit better at pass rushing, this is somebody who I think could be drafted a lot higher than what we're talking about right now. The other player, speaking of guys who are good run defenders, Nash Hutchmacher from Nebraska. This is another player who, sort of like you talked about with CJ West, like his bread and butter is going to be up front. It's going to be holding the line of scrimmage, just what he does. He's got that bowling ball build, shorter arms. He's just not going to be a pass rusher for you. Single-digit pass rush win rate over the last 3 seasons that he has been a contributor at Nebraska, and the highest was this past year at just a 7.1%. So it's not a lot. However, I love guys with wrestling backgrounds, especially if you play in the trenches. Hutchmacher's got a wrestling background. 4-time state champion in high school. 43-0 as a senior, with each win via pin, including 30 victories that were under a minute. This guy didn't just wrestle. He wrestled so good, he made people quit wrestling. He made people contemplate, all right, why did I sign up for this as a high school? I was just trying to get a little stronger, man. That's all I was trying to do here. And now I got to go up against this behemoth who's on the mat here with me. I mean, he was incredible. He won a state championship, a high school state championship in the shot put as well in track and field. And he sort of just brings that like bowling ball core strength to trench play. And again, like he's not the most explosive guy out there. He's got the shorter arms. He doesn't have a deep pass rush bag that he can consistently go to, but a workhorse and somebody who just for as long as he can remember has just been latching on to dudes, moving them against their will, showcasing great upper body strength and core strength. And I think that he still does that at a pretty high level at Nebraska. So even though the pass rush winning percentage is low, and he'll likely be a late day 3 pick because of it, perhaps he can show you a little bit of extra juice, even if it's just better bull rushing that we see at the Shrine Bowl. I just want to see the dominance of what he could be as a run defender, but then also, do you have anything left in the tank in pass rushing that we could really buy into? Because the background is something that every NFL team is going to love with this dude.
No, absolutely. I think he and Ty Robinson, a couple of big monsters in there. It was tough to run between the tackles on Nebraska, too. Absolutely. Those are two guys in this circuit that I'm curious to watch. And I love that you brought up Pegues, because honestly, all year, one of my favorite football players in the country. I mean, you talk about two-way superstars. We talk about Travis Hunter all the time, but J.J. Pegues has got to be put on that list also, especially the Wildcat quarterback stuff I love, because you knew when Lane Kiffin needed a yard or two, big number 38 was coming in at quarterback, and whatever happens. I absolutely loved watching him, and I think, again, it just adds on to a great defensive line group that we have. I think it is the best position unit in this class, and these are all really good players, and we got a ton more to talk about.
You know, he should have been, from what you're saying there, J.J. Pegues should have been runner-up for the Heisman. That's what I heard.
I could argue it.
Travis Hunter, J.J. Pegues, Ashton Jeanty.
Yeah, I mean, if Jeanty would have played linebacker, maybe But
then, we're moving them up. Then we're moving them up a little bit. Position versatility, folks. It's all about return on investment, value, two sides of the ball. All right, what two edge rushers are we talking about here? When we're looking at this edge rush group for the Shrine Bowl, Tyler Barron is the first guy on the list from Miami. Tyler Batty, from BYU. Fadil Diggs from Syracuse. Easton Downs from Oklahoma. Elijah Ponder is the next guy from Cal Poly. Ahmad Hassanian from Boise State. Antoine Powell-Ryland from Virginia Tech. Elijah Roberts, SMU. Quay Robinson, who I saw is not practicing, from Alabama. I was looking forward to seeing him because I think that his pass win percentage numbers were very good at Alabama this past year, but it looks like he's not practicing. Brady Swinson from LSU, and then Johnny Walker from Missouri, who we talking about here on the edge.
All right, first, so I went Big Ten for the inside. I'm going ACC off the edge, and I'm going to start with one of my favorite players in the country, Elijah Roberts from SMU. He's a transfer in from Miami, played the last 2 years at SMU, didn't really get a shot to play a lot at Miami, and he just absolutely excelled. Led the nation in pressures over the last 2 seasons, 131 pressures over the last 2 years at SMU. Really underrated defense that they put together, especially their front seven, but he was the best player in it. He's a 280-pound, maybe even 290-pound edge rusher, usually in a two-point stance, but he's a power rusher, right? He's a guy, he's relentless, he's got a ton of strength, he's hard to keep off of you, he's got solid length, maybe not the most explosive athlete, but he's a relentless guy who's really strong and has just been a productive pass rusher, and this year a career-high 81.3 run defense grade. He's just a strong, I just think about one of those classic strong side edges, whether it is in a 2 or a 3-point stance. I think Roberts could be a productive player. The question is he an explosive enough athlete? Does he have enough quick twitch to him to really turn the corner, right, on NFL level tackles? Because you're not always just going to overpower him like that, right? Are you going to be just a power rusher? Is there a little more twitch to add to his pass rush game? The second guy, I want to go to Virginia Tech because it's pretty much the exact opposite as Elijah Roberts. Roberts led the country in pressures the last 2 seasons. Antoine Powell-Ryland from Virginia Tech led the nation with 24 sacks over the last 2 seasons, and it's a completely different thing. He turns the corner with the best of them, right? Maybe not the strongest guy. He's not going to do it like Roberts does. He does it with speed. He does it turning the corner, dipping his shoulder, and then occasionally coming back with a counter inside move or a counter spin move. Powell-Ryland is one of the better speed rushers in this class. 90.8 pass rush grade this year. I believe it was 14 sacks for a while. I don't know if he finished the the season leading the nation in sacks, but there was a while this year he was leading the nation in sacks. He's the speed rusher, probably early on that rotational, lighter speed rusher that you're looking for, but he can turn the corner with some of the best of them. And so I just think two edge defenders with completely different builds and completely different styles, but especially Roberts. He's been one of my favorite players in the country to watch over the last 2 seasons at SMU, and a big reason they made the playoff run that they did.
Yeah, two kind of specialized players there, but again, like I've heard a lot of chatter from draft fans who love these guys, specifically Powell Ryland, who I knew there would be a lot of fans of just because of the pass rush quickness. You mentioned the bend, how he could turn the corner, and like that's always going to sell, man. People are always going to be invested in that when you could do that really well, and obviously the numbers reflect it, not just the PFF grades, but also the common statistics too. So Powell Ryland is somebody I am very much looking forward to seeing when we get to Texas to check out the Shrine Bowl practices. Tyler Barron from Miami. I'll stick along the ACC. Sure, why not? We'll keep the train rolling. Tyler Barron is somebody that I think is just not getting talked about enough amongst this edge rush group. So he was a former 4-star recruit. He started his career at Tennessee, but now at Miami, and the numbers for him are really good. I mean, since he's become a full-time starter in 2023, you want bigger sample size when you look at percentiles and everything like that. So we take a 2-year sample size. Typically, that's what we go with when we come up with these percentiles. But in a 2-year sample size for Tyler Barron at Miami, 91st percentile pass rush win percentage, 17.8%. I think he really knows how to get after the passer. I think he really knows how to get by offensive tackles pretty well. Run defense grade, 77.2. 8.8% run stop percentage. That's 88th percentile. I mean, like, this dude knows what he's doing on the edge. I think he's just a really solid edge rush player. Now, I wish he played with a little bit more violence. Like, that's the thing. When I watched his tape, to me, that was really the missing piece from him, because there's so much that you like. The grades are good. The consistency is there. 6'5", 260 pounds. So he's built well for the NFL level. He plays a 4-3 defensive end. He can play up as a stand-up outside linebacker for you. He's got a lot of experience to him. Redshirt senior, so he's played a lot over his career, mainly at Miami over the last 2 years, but still, if he played with a little bit more violence, if he converted that speed to power there a little bit more, I think I'd be more all in on this player, because there's so much else that he brings to the table. So to me, I'm looking forward to see him not only just bring all-around ability. I think they're going to be able to play him in all situations. Does he have that pop at contact? Does he explode off the line of scrimmage? Or is it something where I feel like that stuff is middling? Because if it is, that often doesn't fly at the NFL level. You kind of gotta be special if you're not super violent. You got to have great first step explosiveness, or you got to have elite bend, or great power in your legs, or just long arms. You're winning with your measurables, whatever it is. If you don't play with violence, you just often aren't making enough of a difference at the NFL level. Solve your problems with aggression. That is the coaching term that is said all the time from a lot of different coaches, and I feel like I just need to see a little bit more aggression with Tyler Barron from Miami, and I hope we get to see that at the practices, because there's a lot that you can like from him. Tyler Batty from BYU, a little bit of a different story. Now, him, you love the measurables, listed at 6'5", 275 pounds. I mean, he is a big dude. To me, he's sort of an in-between between a true edge rusher, maybe more of an interior defensive lineman for like a 3-4 team. So that is what I'm looking forward to seeing from him, because when you look at his overall grades this season, 79.2 overall defensive grade, 74.4 run defense grade, 75.0 pass rush grade, 71.2 coverage grade, even when they were dropping him off the line of scrimmage, because I think he's got a high IQ in how he sees the game and where he believes the ball is going. So anytime that you got 70s across the board, I mean, you're a pretty damn good all-around football player, and especially if you plug in the size that Batty has, well, now we're talking about something that we could be really interested in. So to me, what kind of a pass rusher is he when he is in on those one-on-one situations? Because this past year, 13.7% pass rush win percentage. The year prior, when he was also a full-time starter, 12.5. So not the worst, but let's see what it's like in those one-on-one situations when you're lined up as more of a 4-3 defensive end. And then when it comes to those interior responsibilities, I think we will see plenty of him lined up in a 4-eye as a 3-4 interior defensive lineman. Okay, what do you like then as well? Where is the strength level? Are you holding the line of scrimmage the way that you need to? Does that run defense grade really show up here? I think that those two guys, the two Tylers, I didn't realize that I just took two Tylers, but these two Tylers here for different reasons, I'm looking forward to see at the Shrine Bowl.
Yeah, no, I can tell you I got to see Tyler Barron on the field, actually, when Miami was playing at Louisville, and I'll tell you right now, he looks the part. You're going to see this guy down at the Shrine Bowl and go, oh, man, that guy should be great. Just look at him, right? And I think Tyler Batty, kind of the same way, built fantastic, like you mentioned. For Barron, you mentioned it, the violence. It's the lack of violence and just consistency with that. And I think for Tyler Batty, is he explosive enough? Can he turn a lot of? He was the pressure leader at BYU. Can he turn more of those pressures that he did get into sacks? I think that was the one thing with BYU's pass rush, was just not quite finishing with sacks enough. And I think Batty, if he can do that, if he can get off the line a little bit quicker at his size, he could be really good. But they're both built like freaks, and they have at least the NFL type body that coaches are going to want to work with.
All right, moving on to linebacker and then the secondary guys in a second here as we preview a lot of players that we're looking forward to seeing at the Shrine Bowl this weekend. But before we get to that, have you guys played Pick 6 by DraftKings yet? Because if not, you better get in on it, because we got conference championship games and then the Super Bowl, and that's all you got here. As the official daily fantasy sports partner of the NFL, DraftKings does fantasy sports like nobody else. You play for better payouts on Pick 6. Super easy to get started. You select 2 or more players. Choose if they will have more or less of a single stat. Could be receptions, touchdown, carries, tackles, sacks, whatever it is. And then that's your Pick 6 set right there. It's available in most states: Missouri, California, Texas, Georgia, and so much more. DraftKings is even making it sweeter if this is your first time. If you bet just $5 on any Pick 6 set, you get 50 in Pick 6 credits right there if it is your first bet. Obviously, there's 2 fantastic matchups, and there's a lot of different ways to go about this. I mean, I look at that Chiefs and Buffalo Bills game, and it's like, all right, who's going to stand out? Is Khalil Shakir going to be the leading receiver again, or do you think it's going to be somebody else? If you do, you check out their numbers and see if, okay, more or less here. When you look at some of the rushing totals, I think the Chiefs did a really good job holding the Buffalo Bills to low rushing totals when they faced off earlier this season in November. If you think that's going to happen again, you can take a look at the totals and say, all right, well, I think it's going to be a little bit less here. You just take 2 or more, and there you go. That's your Pick 6 app. Win more cash on Pick 6. Download the DraftKings Pick 6 app and use the promo code PFF. That's promo code PFF. For new customers, play $5 and get 50 in Pick 6 credits. Only on DraftKings Pick 6. The crown is yours. If you got a gambling problem, call 1-800-GAMBLER. Help is available for problems with gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org in Connecticut. Must be 18 plus, age and eligibility restrictions do vary by jurisdiction. Pick 6 not available everywhere, including New York and Ontario. Void where prohibited. 1 per new customer. Bonuses awarded as non-withdrawable Pick 6 credits that expire in 30 days. Limited time offer. See terms at pick6.draftkings.com/promos. Are the linebacker group that we have going to Texas for the Shrine Bowl: Carson Bruner from Washington, Teddy Buchanan from Cal, Jamon Dumas-Johnson from Kentucky, Jay Higgins from Iowa, Chandler Martin from Memphis, Francisco Mauga from Miami, Ken Medrano from UCLA, Deshaun Pace from UCF, Chris Paul Jr. from Ole Miss, Greg Penn III from LSU, Aaron Smith from South Carolina State, Jackson Woodard from UNLV, and then DeRicky Wright, the sort of safety linebacker hybrid from Vanderbilt. Who you shining a light on here in this group? Who you excited to look at?
Trev, I think there needs to be a rule when it comes to drafting nowadays. If you just want a fundamentally sound, relatively quiet football player who can help your team, you call up Kirk Ferentz and the Iowa Hawkeyes and you go, what do you have for me this year? And I think that's the case at linebacker with Jay Higgins. Look, I don't think he's going to be the most explosive athlete out of this linebacker class, but he may be the most fundamentally sound. 92.2 overall grade over the last 2 years. That leads all Power 4 linebackers. 94.4 coverage grade in that span, leads all FBS linebackers. And if that stat sounds familiar, it's the same thing we said about Jack Campbell when he was coming out of Iowa a couple of years ago. So look, fundamentally sound player, fantastic tackler, knows where he needs to be at all times in run defense and in coverage, may not have blazing speed or some of the explosive tools that you're looking for. He may not be the guy that completely lights up the combine. It'll probably be good enough, but he's just a darn good football player. I think if you're putting somebody near the top of the list of just who knows how to play linebacker properly, Jay Higgins is darn near the top of the list in this class. I love watching him, and I just love the fact that there isn't really like hot and cold with him. He's the same guy week in and week out. Very much like the rest of the Iowa defense. You know what you're getting out of them every single week. You know what Kirk Ferentz and Phil Parker build down there on defense, just like we saw with Cooper DeJean and Jack Campbell. We'll see Sebastian Castro at the Senior Bowl as well. But Higgins is a guy who really holds their front seven together at linebacker. He's just as fundamentally sound as any player in this class, and I think a very safe, probably a day 3 pick. Maybe sneaks into round 3 if somebody likes him, but I think a very safe pick. You know what you're getting out of Jay Higgins.
Does he have the speed? That's what I'm looking to see. Does he have the speed? Can we see that at the Shrine Bowl practices? Can that stand out for him? Because there is a lot to like. Very reliable tackler. Somebody's got a ton of experience, like you mentioned. Somebody who knows where to be, understands the throwing lanes. That's why you see that high coverage grade, because he plays with very high IQ as well. So I'm excited to see him as well, because he's somebody who's really stood out in our grading system over the last couple of years. Chris Paul Jr. from Ole Miss is my guy, just because maybe he's LB1 in this class. You know, it's not like LB1 is a foregone conclusion. I think there's a handful of people that have a claim to that title. Carson Schweschinger from UCLA, Demetrius Knight from South Carolina, Jihad Campbell from Alabama, and I would throw Chris Paul Jr. his name into that list as well from Ole Miss. Now, this is somebody who played 3 years when he was at Arkansas and really didn't grade out super well, especially the last 2 years when he was more of a consistent contributor. Just wasn't really a standout player. And then you get to this past year, so he transfers over to Ole Miss. This is his first year. 87.2 overall defensive grade, 84.6 run defense grade, 83.9 pass rush grade, 78.1 coverage grade. He's just 6'1", 235 pounds, but this dude does not miss any tackles. Over 90 tackles this year, 5% missed tackle percentage. That is very low for as many opportunities as you have. And I just think that he is such a fast processor. It looked like he understood the game like a 5-6 year vet this past year. So the way that he approached being the middle centerpiece of that Rebels defense, and he got an interception this year. He had 4 forced incompletions as well, so double-digit forced incompletion percentage for how many times he was dropping into coverage. Dalton, I felt like I was watching one of the more fluid, fast, very fast processing and reliable linebackers in college football, and all of that stuff plays at the next level. So I don't know if he's got the measurables or just the standout athletic traits to really be that first linebacker off the board, but somebody who probably a day 2 selection, but one that a team's going to be really happy with as a player in the middle of their defense.
Yeah, no, one of the breakout stars of college football, honestly, transferring from from Arkansas to Ole Miss, and there was always potential when he was at Arkansas, but he just found the right fit there with the Rebels, and he got a lot better. You mentioned the coverage ability. I think it's something that gets lost. Really, you know, both of these guys have it. It just gets lost in the shuffle when looking at linebackers and knowing what their responsibilities are nowadays. If you can prove, no matter which size you are, if you can run and you can cover, you got a chance to stick in the league, at least as a part-time player and possibly as a star.
Yeah. No, I agree with you completely, man. He is he's somebody who I'm really looking forward to seeing. I think he can stand out in the big way. There's no doubt about it. Cornerbacks. Let's get to corners next. Zay Alexander from LSU, Kobe Bryant from Kansas, Jordan Clark from Notre Dame, Mello Dotson from Kansas as well. So we got the Kansas boys here. O'Donnell Fortune from South Carolina, Zah Frazier from UTSA, Jamari Harris from Iowa, Marcus Harris from Cal, Tyron Herring from Delaware, Garnett Hollis Jr. from West Virginia, Elijah Huzzy from North Carolina, Jalen Kimber from Penn State, Robert Longerbeam, elite name, from Rutgers, Jason Marshall from Florida, Jabbar Muhammad from Oregon, Savon Revel from East Carolina, although he will not be participating, is still rehabbing from that ACL injury that he suffered at the beginning of the college football season. Corey Thornton from Louisville, Justin Wally from Minnesota, Issa Waxter from Villanova, and then Noel Williams from Cal. Who stands out to you in the cornerback group?
Well, that's a pretty stacked group. There's a lot of talent.
It's a really intriguing group.
Now that you listed off, and when I was going through it, there was probably 5 or 6 guys I could have picked. But you know what? I think there's going to be a theme on defense here in this draft, and that's how many darn guys we talk about from South Carolina with the year that they had on defense. I'm going to go with O'Donnell Fortune at corner, and I think for as much as been talked about Dylan Stewart in the future, and Kyle Kennard, and T.J. Sanders, and all the other guys, Nicky Munwari, all the other guys, I think O'Donnell Fortune's an underrated player coming out of this defense, and I think especially just a really heady player, especially in zone coverage, knows where the football's at all times. 5 interceptions this year, 90.2 coverage grade. The only Power 4 corners with a higher coverage grade were Travis Hunter and Jahdae Barron. That's how good he was. I mean, when you talk about this South Carolina defense, they were stacked at every position this year. It's a veteran player with a lot of experience who played well for them even before this breakout year from the team. I think especially in zone coverage, he's a guy, I think people are going to like his football IQ. They're going to like his awareness to the ball. They're going to like how quickly he triggers to get up into the flat and tackle. Not exactly the best run defender, kind of has a thin build to him, but I think as a coverage player who can rotate in on the outside in a zone-heavy defense, Fortune could be really good, and I think for as good as he was in previous years, he had a serious breakout this year, and I don't think we're talking about him enough alongside all of these names that we have at corner because, we know who the top-end guys are, Hunter and Will Johnson and those guys, but there's some pretty good depth to this class, and I think he's just another one of these South Carolina defenders that we're going to talk about on draft weekend.
Dude, I agree. I remember going through corners initially, and Fortune was one of those guys who was sort of lower on the list, so I didn't get to him immediately. And when I got to him, I was like, God, we have another good one like in this class, and there's just a lot of really solid corners. I think corner is sneaky one of the deeper groups that we have in the 2025 NFL draft. So I'm glad that you shouted him out. A guy who, when I didn't know of this player until the season really began, and then I'm doing some more digging on him, and I've really liked what I've seen. I really like the background from Zy Alexander from LSU. 6'2", 195 pounds. So he's got a little bit of a slender build to him. He was at Southeast Louisiana before he was at LSU. That final year that he was out at Southeast Louisiana had an 82.4 coverage grade. Struggled a little bit last year, his first year when he was at LSU, but this year back up to a really good coverage grade, an 81.8. You look at the ball production that this guy has had. He's got 14 interceptions in his college career, dating back to the 3 years that he was at Southeast Louisiana as well. I mean, honestly, it didn't have any his freshman year there. So over the last 4 years, he has 14 interceptions. He also has a forced incompletion percentage above 10% in each of the last 4 years, at 19.2% this year, which is a fantastic number. This is a man coverage type of defender. He really likes to just, all right, cat coverage. This is my cat. I'm covering him. He's not catching the football. That's what Zy Alexander's all about. I don't think he's the most athletic dude in the world, which is, it can get you in a little bit of trouble when man coverage is your bread and butter and you go into the NFL, and I got a little bit of overall athleticism worries for you. But I think that he positions himself really well to sort of mitigate any sort of long speed issues that he might have. I think that he can, time his turns and certainly the distance that he gives wide receivers before the snap. He knows how to just very properly say, okay, this is where I need to be to make sure I can threaten to always go up and either get my hands on a football if I'm breaking downhill or be able to open it up and keep up with them as they are running down the field. You just don't see a lot of open targets from this guy. When you look at the open target percentage this past year, just at 36.5%, that's much improved from the 46.9% the year prior. And I mean, when you look at him at Southeast Louisiana, nobody was getting open on this dude. He was on 289 coverage snaps. He had an open target percentage of 2.1%. I mean, that was as locked down as it gets. That shows you, hey, you need to take a step up in competition level. And he did go into LSU. I just love that mentality. I think he's going to have the chance to really get to thrive with those man coverage abilities at those practices, and I can't wait to see how he fares in the one-on-ones, because if he could fare well in those one-on-ones being that man coverage defender, I'm going to start having a lot less question marks about his overall athletic ability. So when you naturally can get your hands on the football as much as Zy Alexander has, I'm going to pay attention. That's the type of cornerback that might not be the athlete that you draft in the first round, but somebody I am very comfortable taking on day 2 for a man coverage heavy defense.
No, absolutely. I think he's the press man alternative to Sikkema Ravel if you don't get him earlier in the draft. I think for sure. I have some questions about him in off coverage and his footwork and his vision and stuff in zone coverage, but you're right. As far as press man goes and the length that comes with and his technique, there's not many better with it, right? I mean, obviously you're getting into the elite guys like Travis Hunter and Ravel and guys like that, but I could just picture somebody like, I think about Brian Flores immediately, right? Ton of man coverage, or an Aaron Glenn drafting this guy. That's what you want. If you're looking for that type of corner, then he's going to be higher on your board than maybe a zone team like, say, somebody with Vic Fangio or somebody like that as your defensive coordinator. I think his fate in the NFL is going to depend a little bit on the fit of the defense, but there is a road for success for him for sure in that press man coverage like you mentioned.
Yep, I agree. I do agree with you. He is a scheme dependent type of a player, but as we sort of get into more team specific big boards later in the draft process, his name's going to stand out for those man coverage teams. At the safety position, Elijah Clark from Syracuse, R.J. Mickens from Clemson, Glendon Miller from Maryland, Shiloh Sanders from Colorado, Marquise Sigel from Kansas State. Cameron Silman Craig from Colorado as well. Shamari Simmons from Arizona State. Mike Smith Jr. from Eastern Kentucky. And then Craig Woodson from Cal. Who are you looking at the safety group here as we round things out, Dalton?
I'm actually going to go with R.J. Mickens, and he's got a pedigree. He's the son of former Jets defensive back Ray Mickens, and he was really the glue that held together.
Oh, you're going with a former Jet connection.
Hey,
crazy.
Hold up now. He might even find himself on the Jets if Aaron Glenn appears to be their new head coach, and he played with Mickens for a long time, so you might still get it. But no, I mean, Mickens, the glue that held together an extremely young Clemson defense this year. They had freshmen and sophomores playing all over the place. He was like the one senior on their entire defense and a versatile player. He's played in the slot before, just like his dad did back in the day. Moved back to safety. I think that's a better spot for him with his vision. He knows where to be. He's got good size. And I think you can just see there's a level of football intelligence that comes with his background and with obviously playing at Clemson, who puts out so many great defensive players all the time. Just a solid football player. And I think somebody, likely a day 3 pick, not the most explosive athlete, but if you want a guy with a high football intelligence and a leader, I think especially that's the biggest thing at Clemson is with such a young defense around him, a productive leader, 4th in the country, by the way, among safeties with an 89.8 coverage grade. It's just a guy who 95% of the time knows exactly where he needs to be. You very rarely see missed assignments. You very rarely see him in the wrong spot against the run or against the pass. And again, a little bit of versatility. He's mostly going to play safety for you, but a little bit of versatility where he can line up in the slot, and he's at least got experience and knows how to do it. So I think R.J. Mickens could be at least a good depth add for a team on day 3, and eventually could become a starter at safety. I just think he's not going to be the most explosive athlete. He's a better football player than he is an athlete, especially with his background.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of guys that, I just want to say, like, he definitely stood out this year. So he was definitely somebody who I think was worth the shout out. I am very much looking forward to see him as well. Looking forward to seeing the Colorado guys as well, the Colorado duo there, how they're able to play off of each other here in this practices. If that gives them a little bit more confidence, can they make a little bit more plays this week? Because sometimes it takes a little bit of time, right? You get that first practice as a new defense, new players around you. Honestly, that is a big reason why I loved Dadrian Taylor Demerson so much before he got drafted, is because I got to see him at the Shrine Bowl. And practice number 1 last year, he's like teaching the other defensive backs where they're supposed to be in the defense. And it's like, hold on, didn't you also just get here? Aren't you also supposed to be learning it for the first time? And the fact that he already had that much of an understanding of the defense is something that really stood out amongst his playmaking as well. I'm going to shout out Elijah Clark from Syracuse, who he's a former corner that was moved over to safety. And I'm intrigued to see how he can play and how he could stand out and if he really stacks up against the rest of the safety group, because listed around like 180, 185 pounds. First of all, no safety in the NFL is really playing at 180, 185. So he would need to get bigger if he wants to stay at safety, but he was moved from corner to safety because he doesn't exactly have the long speed to stick at corner. So they moved him back to the safety spot. And the reason why they couldn't get this guy out of the lineup is because he is just relentless for wherever the ball is going. He's relentless to go tackle. He's relentless to attack it in the air. I think because he moved to safety, he is a smoother moving, explosive safety than you are used to seeing. So it really is that benefit of, okay, you're not quite fast enough to play corner. Let's move you to safety and just make you a plus athlete at the safety position. I think he's a good form tackler despite being a little bit less of weight. And so how does that all show up this weekend in Texas? Are you able to stand out amongst your peers when it comes to that athleticism? Can you make more plays on the ball? Can you get those interceptions? And then when it comes to that closing speed and being able to put your shoulder, you're not going to full tackle in the practices, but can you put the shoulders in on guys? Can you make it so, okay, yeah, I was there. If we were tackling and we were doing live tackling, I would have tackled you here. Elijah Clark, he's just somebody that I'm very intrigued with him moving from corner to safety. So that transition, I wonder if he gets some corner reps. I wonder if they'll move him back at corner and he'll be able to play a little bit of corner, a little bit of safety. So I wonder if we will get that from him as well. But I think that you had a good shout out from RJ Mickens because of the great year that he has had too.
Yeah, and I think one other guy I'm just going to mention, you talked about the two Colorado guys. Cameron Silman Craig was really known. I know there's a lot of other big names, and Travis Hunter and Shiloh Sanders, all those guys. He was really thought of as the heart and soul of that Colorado defense, played a lot of different roles in the box, in the slot, one of the best tacklers on their team. I think he could be a lot of fun to watch down there for you too.
Yep. There we go. That's our preview that we have of the Shrine Bowl in Texas this weekend. Practices start on Saturday, so we'll go Saturday, Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday. You will be getting those practice updates, and then that will bleed into the Senior Bowl as well. Most wonderful time of the year. Getting the All-Star games, getting to crack the pads again. It's not just talking about how these prospects play. You get to see them play individually against each other. These are two fantastic environments. A little bit later, this week, we're going to be previewing the Senior Bowl as well to make sure that you guys are as ready as you possibly can be for both of those events. For Dalton Wasserman, I'm Trevor Sikkema saying we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.